As has been said over these several days, it seems that it's time to open another link in that seemingly endless chain of the way of stories. But in order to open a new link, we have to close the old. And in an endeavor to do that, several stories were told on Sunday, but those stories were purposely left unfinished. But let's see what happens for us when those stories are completed. The first story was a story about a great teacher called Saku. Now, Saku was present on earth at that time when the essence of Hinduism was united with the philosopher's stone in the person of the one who became the Buddha. So you could say that a fire was ignited. But during that very volatile time, there were these great teachers who emerged, and they had powers such as are recorded, and there are great stories about them. But Saku had a group of students around him who were young Brahmins of the priestly caste. So it was at that very crucial time when the fire of Buddhism was being propagated and burning. And Saku would give teachings and very learned dissertations to this group of Brahmins. And amongst that group of Brahmins, it happened that there was a prince. He was the son of the king of one of the great provinces at that time. But it was noted by all of those who were present that Saku would direct greater attention to this young prince, who was called Tanaka, more than he would to the other students. And one day, Saku heard the other students talking amongst themselves, saying, "Oh, you know, our teacher always gives more attention to Tanaka, and it's probably because we're only just Brahmins and he's a prince of the realm." So Saku wanted to teach his students a lesson. So one day he began a very profound and learned discourse on that which was emerging relative to this great new religion. But with the powers that he had, he made it appear that the city from which the young Brahmins and the prince came was on fire. So, of course, the students looking out of the window saw their city aflame, and they immediately each thought of their possessions and said amongst themselves, "Oh, I have to go because I have to save this. Oh, I better go because I have to save that." And so they all decided that their teacher wouldn't notice if they departed, because he was totally absorbed in giving his very learned discourse. So they slipped away, except Tanaka, who remained absorbed totally in that which his master was saying. So, of course, when the other students went off, they found that their city, in fact, was not burning. So they crept back into the presence of Saku and sat down, rather chastened by this experience. But after Saku had finished his learned discourse, He said to the students, "Now you've perhaps learned a lesson, but allow Tanaka to speak. Tanaka, tell your fellow students why you did not race to save your possessions." And Tanaka responded, and he said, "It is because, Master, everything is present here in your presence. All else is an illusion." The second story is about a great Sufi sheikh who, on a day of a certain celebration, requested his dervish followers to go to take a live chicken and kill it and defeather it in a place where no one or nothing was present, and to bring it back for preparation for the feast. So all of the dervishes went off, and one of them, who was called Akbar, also went off. But Akbar went to his house, and he attempted to enter his house with the live chicken in order to kill it. He went into a closet, he went into a barn, and finally he climbed to a high mountain where there was a dark cave. But this took some while, and in the meanwhile all the other students had returned to the master with their killed and defeathered chickens. But finally everyone had to wait for Akbar, who didn't return until the sun was going down. And when Akbar returned, under his arm was a live squawking chicken, and everyone laughed at him and called him Abdal. And then the great sheikh said, "You may laugh, because in our language Abdal means four, but in another language Abdal means one who is awakened, enlightened. Tell us, Akbar, why have you bought a live chicken, not, as requested, one that's been slaughtered where no one is present?" Akbar said, "Master, I went to my house. I went into a closet. I went into a barn. I climbed a mountain into a dark cave. But in every place there was a presence. There is nowhere that there is not. So I was unable to slaughter the chicken." How do these two stories bring our circle around? How do they close this link to enable another link to be formed for us? Where do these two stories meet? What's your experience of life now? Where do they meet? What happens for you when the movement of life, every experience that comes to us and meets this presence, this state of being present, receptive and open, stillness and the movement. What is it that arises from the meeting of these two for us?
Somehow it's important wherever you are, that that's where you are,
Yeah.
and that's an important moment.
Yes.
And I think other people respond to
They certainly do.
that.
I think they come at the same time too, because one is about sensing an external presence that's everywhere, like the divine presence, and one is about being present.
Absolutely
and it appears
so.
that when you get the inner one, you get the outer one. When you get the outer one, you've got the inner one.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so, isn't it? Seamlessly.
Mm.
When we're present, we're embracing everything. There's presence. There's nothing else but presence, is there? And can we ever lose that awareness now? Is there anywhere we can go that's outside of that presence? Nowhere. But what does it mean when Tanaka says to his master, everything is present here in your presence? What does he really mean by that? Recognizing that in the story he was totally absorbed to the exclusion of everything else in his master's dissertation. What is it that we're absorbed in now? And this is a paradox, a kind of enigma for us. What is it we're absorbed in that allows us to recognize that there is nothing outside? There is nothing absent. Everything is present. What's the clue to this that we have experienced in our life? And we know what it is. We can observe it. It's observable. We can sit and watch an ant crawling across the floor and be aware of the experience that occurs in that, because we find ourselves as an observer watching the ant, and then we become the movement of the ant, and then we become the ant. In that process, a self and separateness disappears. Isn't that so? Isn't that so with every experience, whether it be someone standing in front of us, or whether it be that ant crawling, or whether it's pouring a cup of tea, or making a cup of coffee? What is it that you're observing now about life and this presence? no self involved. In whatever it is, we lose ourself. Isn't it so? There's no self involved in it. Isn't this intense presence? Can you be outside of it? You cannot. So, what is it that's emerged when these two meet? Oh, that's part of the new link, so we won't get into it.